There's a moment almost everyone reaches. You're not broke anymore. Your bills are paid. Life looks stable. So why does it still feel heavy? Because enough never arrives. It keeps moving. There's a moment almost everyone reaches, but very few talk about it. It doesn't arrive with a crisis. It doesn't come with panic or desperation. It shows up quietly, almost politely. You're no longer struggling in obvious ways. Your bills get paid on time. Your bank account doesn't hit zero before the month ends. You don't feel that tight feeling in your chest every time you swipe your card. You're not checking prices with fear at the grocery store anymore. From the outside, your life looks fine, responsible, stable. And that's exactly why this phase is so confusing. Because nothing feels broken enough to justify discomfort. You did what you were supposed to do. You studied, you worked harder, you moved up, you increased your income, and for a while it worked. There was relief, breathing room, a sense that you were finally getting ahead. But then something strange happened. The stress didn't disappear. It just changed its shape. Instead of worrying about surviving the month, you started worrying about maintaining this version of your life. The apartment you once felt lucky to afford now feels normal. The car that felt like a milestone is just another payment. The lifestyle you worked toward quietly became the minimum you need to sustain. You don't feel grateful anymore. You feel responsible. Responsible for keeping things together, for not slipping backward, for not losing what you've built. This is the phase nobody warns you about, because it doesn't look like failure. It looks like success. But it doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like standing on a narrow ledge. You're not falling, but you're not relaxed either. There's a constant low-level tension beneath your days, a feeling that you can't fully slow down, that you can't afford to get careless, so you keep going. You push a little harder, you say yes more often, you delay rest, you postpone peace, not because you're greedy, but because you're afraid of losing ground. And slowly, almost invisibly, the question changes. It's no longer, can I survive? It becomes, how do I make sure this doesn't fall apart? That question lives in the background of everything. It's there when you check your email, when you think about switching jobs, when you imagine taking a break. You're stable, but only as long as nothing goes wrong. And that realization is unsettling, because deep down, you know how fragile this stability really is. One medical bill, one layoff, one unexpected shift. And suddenly, the margin disappears. So even on good days, your body doesn't fully relax. You're not panicking, but you're not at ease. You've reached the place you thought would feel like enough. And yet, something feels missing. Not excitement, not motivation, peace. When money was tight, everything felt simple. There was a clear problem and a clear solution. I need to earn more. That belief carried you forward. It gave you purpose. It made the struggle feel temporary. You told yourself, this is just a phase. And when your income finally increased, it felt like proof that you were right. The pressure eased. The fear softened. Life felt lighter. But it didn't last. Because money has a strange effect on expectations. What once felt like abundance quickly turns into baseline. You don't notice it happening at first. You upgrade one thing because you can, then another because it makes sense, then another because everyone else at your level seems to have it. None of it feels reckless. None of it feels irresponsible. It feels reasonable. But slowly, your expenses rise to meet your income, not in dramatic jumps, in quiet adjustments, a slightly better neighborhood, more convenience, less tolerance for discomfort. And suddenly, you're earning more than you ever thought you would, yet the sense of security hasn't grown the same way. The finish line moves. Again, this is where frustration sets in. Because you did exactly what was supposed to work. You increased your income. You improved your situation, so why doesn't it feel different? Why does enough still feel just out of reach? The answer isn't discipline. It isn't intelligence. It's adaptation. Your brain is wired to normalize improvement. What once felt extraordinary becomes expected. And once something is expected, it no longer feels like progress. It just feels necessary. So the raise that once felt life-changing becomes background noise. The higher salary becomes something you're protecting, not celebrating. And with that shift, money stops feeling like a solution. It starts feeling like a responsibility, something you have to keep generating, something you can't risk losing. This is where many people make the mistake of doubling down. If this level doesn't feel like enough, they think, the next one will. So they chase more income, more status, more security. But the pattern repeats, because the problem was never the number. It was the belief that enough lives somewhere in the future, that peace is delayed until the next milestone. In reality, the system you're living in rewards motion, not arrival. It keeps you striving, it keeps you upgrading, it keeps you comparing. As long as enough is defined by external measures, it will always move. That's the quiet truth most people don't realize until much later. You don't reach enough by earning more. You reach it by deciding where it stops. by defining what you actually need, not what you're expected to want. That shift doesn't happen overnight. It starts with a subtle question: what am I trying to protect? And more importantly, what am I chasing that no longer serves me? Because the moment you stop believing that the next level will finally bring peace, you stop running. And for the first time in a long time, your nervous system gets a chance to breathe. The shift doesn't happen all at once. There's no dramatic moment, no announcement, no finish line. It begins quietly with a realization you can't unsee, that the discomfort you've been feeling isn't because you failed to reach enough. It's because you believed enough was something you'd arrive at someday. For most of your life, enough was always ahead of you. When you were younger, it looked like independence. Then it looked like stability. Then it looked like freedom. Each time you got closer, the shape changed. And for a long time, you blamed yourself for that. You thought you were impatient, ungrateful, always wanting more. But the truth is simpler and harder to accept. You were chasing a moving target. Because in a system that rewards growth, enough is never supposed to be reached. It's supposed to keep you striving, keep you upgrading, keep you comparing, keep you producing. Once you see that, something inside you softens, not in defeat, in clarity. You stop asking why it never feels like enough, and you start asking who gets to decide what enough means. That question changes everything, because the moment you realize enough isn't a milestone, it's a boundary. You begin to notice how much of your stress comes from trying to maintain appearances, not luxury, just normalcy, a lifestyle that signals you're doing okay, that you belong, that you're not falling behind. And you realize how expensive that signal is, not just financially, emotionally. It costs you rest. It costs you margin. It costs you attention. So the shift begins with subtraction, not ambition, not grinding harder, but choosing where the line is, what you actually need to feel safe, what you're willing to let go of, what no longer deserves your energy. This isn't about giving up comfort. It's about redefining it. Comfort stops meaning more. It starts meaning enough space to breathe, enough space to say no, enough space to slow down, enough space to absorb a surprise without panic. You stop optimizing your life for growth. You start optimizing it for resilience. That changes how you think about money. Money stops being something you chase. It becomes something you use to create margin. Time margin, emotional margin, choice margin. You may still want to grow. You may still aim higher. But now growth has a direction, not outward, but inward, toward stability that isn't dependent on constant motion, toward peace that doesn't disappear the moment things pause. This is the moment many people fear, because choosing enough feels like opting out of comparison, out of constant striving, out of the race you were never asked if you wanted to run. But what you're really opting into is agency. You're no longer waiting for permission to rest. You're no longer measuring your worth by your output. You're no longer postponing peace for a future version of yourself. You begin to notice the quiet things again. A morning without urgency, an evening without dread, a weekend that doesn't feel like recovery. Nothing about your life may look dramatically different from the outside, but internally, everything shifts. Because the pressure lifts, not because you earned more, but because you stop believing that more was the answer. That's the moment enough finally arrives. Not as a number in your bank account, but as a decision you make and protect. You were never broken. You were just taught to chase enough instead of choosing it.